Hello students, how are you? Welcome back to my class and this is teacher Hannah. So for today's lesson, we will be talking about the respiratory system. So when we say respiratory system, it's all about respiration or breathing, inhaling the oxygen and exhaling the carbon dioxide. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is the function of the respiratory system? The respiratory system is responsible for taking in the oxygen or what we call inspiration and expelling the carbon dioxide or what we call expiration. So the main or the primary organs of the respiratory system are the lungs. Lungs carry out the exchange of gases as we breathe. So here in the respiratory system, red blood cells has its part. So it collects oxygen and carbon dioxide. So during the process, the RBC or red blood cell collect the carbon dioxide and transport it back to the lungs where it leaves the body when we exhale. So the human body needs oxygen to sustain itself. So decrease in oxygen is what we call hypoxia. Complete lack of oxygen is what we call anoxia. So after about 4 minutes, without oxygen, the brain cells begin dying, which can lead to the brain damage. So this is the function of the respiratory system. Let's now talk about the parts of the respiratory system. So the respiratory system is divided into two tracts. These are the upper and the lower respiratory tract. So for the upper respiratory tract, it consists the nose and nasal cavity, the pharynx, and the larynx. And for the lower, it consists the trachea, bronchi or bronchi, and the bronchioles, and the lungs. So we will discuss those parts one by one. Okay, let's start with the upper respiratory tract. First, we have the nose and the nasal cavity. So these are the first section of the body's airway. The nose is the structure of the face, which is made of cartilage, bone, muscle, and skin. It supports and protects the anterior portion of the nasal cavity. So the nasal cavity is a hollow space within the nose and the skull. So the hair and mucous lining of the nasal cavity helps to trap the dust, molds, pollens, and other environmental contaminants before reaching the inner portion of the body or before it reaches the lungs. So that is the function of the nose and the nasal cavity. The second one is the pharynx, or also known as throat. So the pharynx is the body cavity that connects the nasal and oral cavities with the larynx and the esophagus. It allows for the movement of air from the nose and mouth to the larynx in the process of breathing. It is divided into three regions. These are the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Okay, so those are the three regions. So naso from the word nose, oro, oral or mouth, and laryng for the larynx. Okay, so as the air inhaled from the nasal cavity passes into the nasopharynx and descends through the oropharynx. The air inhaled through the oral cavity enters the oropharynx, and then the inhaled air then descends into the laryngopharynx, where it is diverted into the opening of the larynx by the epiglottis. So that's the movement of the air into the pharynx. Next is the larynx. Larynx is located at the anterior portion of the neck. It is also the body's voice box as it contains the vocal folds that produce the sounds of speech and singing. There are several cartilage structures that make up the larynx. First is the epiglottis that serves as the cover of the larynx during swallowing. And inferior to the epiglottis is the thyroid cartilage, also referred as the Adam's apple, and it protects the vocal folds. Then inferior to the thyroid cartilage is the cricoid cartilage. It is a ring shape that surrounds the trachea. It holds the opening of the larynx and supports its posterior end. And larynx also have a vocal folds. So when we say vocal folds, these are folds of mucous membrane that vibrate to produce vocal sounds. So that's the larynx all about. Let's now proceed to the trachea, which is already part of the lower respiratory tract. Trachea is also known as windpipe. It is a wide, hollow tube that connects the larynx to the bronchi or bronchi of the lungs. So trachea provides air passage to your lungs for respiration, to inhale air rich in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. So trachea contains C-shaped cartilaginous rings that prevent it from collapsing or prevent the trachea from collapsing, and they keep the trachea open for air to come in and out. And it has also called epithelium lining. It produces a sticky mucus lining that traps foreign substances and prevents it from reaching the lungs. So these trapped substances are expelled upwards and can either be excreted from the body as a phlegm. So trachea also acts as thermoregulation. So when the air is cold, the trachea helps to humidify and warm the air entering the lungs. And when the air is hot, heat is carried away in exhaled air through evaporation of the water. So that's the function of the trachea. Let's now talk about the bronchi and the bronchioles. So the main function of these two is to carry the air from the trachea into the lungs. The smooth muscle in the bronchioles regulates the airflow into the lungs. So when the body needs a greater volume of air, such as during exercising, the smooth muscles relaxes to dilate the bronchi and the bronchioles. And the cartilage in the bronchi prevents the collapsing of the bronchi during inhalation and exhalation. So the bronchi and the bronchioles has a cilia or the hair-like projections that move microbes and debris up and out of the airways to allow more air to pass into and out of the lungs. So that's the bronchi and bronchioles all about. And the last part of the respiratory system are the lungs. So when we say lungs, these are a pair of spongy, air-filled organs located on either side of the chest. The main function of the lungs is to process or the process of gas exchange called respiration. So when we say respiration is the term for the exchange of oxygen from the environment for carbon dioxide from the body's cell. In the respiration, oxygen from incoming air enters the blood and the carbon dioxide leaves the blood. A reduced lung function means that the ability of the lungs to exchange gases is reduced. So in the lungs, there are this thing called alveoli. Alveoli is a tiny balloon-shaped air sacs, which can be found at the endpoint of the respiratory system. So these are the smallest passageway of the respiratory system where exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs. And the alveoli are lined by a fluid layer known as the surfactant. The surfactant maintains the shape and surface of the air sac or the alveoli. So those are the parts of the respiratory system. So we're already done with the function and parts of the respiratory system. Let's have a review. So the respiratory system is responsible for taking in the oxygen, which is called the inspiration, and expelling the carbon dioxide, or what we call the expiration. Each part is divided into two. These are the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. For the upper, it consists the nose and nasal cavity, the pharynx, and the larynx. And for the lower respiratory tract, it contains the trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles, and the lungs, which is the main organs of the respiratory system. Now, let's move on to the respiratory cycle. So this is the relaxed state of the external intercostal and the diaphragm. So when we say intercostals, these are the muscles that that run between the ribs and help form and move the chest wall. And when we say diaphragm, this is located below the lungs. This is the major muscle of respiration. It is a large dome-shaped muscle that contracts rhythmically and continually, and most of the time involuntarily. So upon inhalation, the diaphragm contracts and flattens and the chest cavity enlarges. So this is the relaxed state of it. And this is the inspiration. So when the air flows in, the ribs move upward and outward due to muscle contraction, and the lung volume increases, causing air pressure to fall, and the diaphragm contracts and flattens, moving downwards. And for this is for the expiration. So when the air flows up, the ribs return to resting position. The lung volume decreases, causing air pressure to rise, and the diaphragm relaxes. So this is the respiratory cycle. Let's now move on to the four respiration processes. First is the pulmonary ventilation or breathing. So this is all about inspiration and expiration in response to changes of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Second one is the external respiration. This is all about the exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide between alveoli or blood in the pulmonary capillaries. Third is the transport of respiratory gases. It occurs when blood transports carbon dioxide to the lungs and oxygen to the body cells. And the fourth or last is the internal respiration, which is all about exchange of oxygen or carbon dioxide between body cells and blood in the body capillaries. So those are the four respiration processes of the respiratory system. We are already done talking with the function and parts of the respiratory system, its cycle, and the four processes. Now let's move on to the diseases of the respiratory system. So the first common disease of the respiratory system is the pneumonia. Pneumonia is a disease in which some of the alveoli of the lungs fill with fluid so the gas exchange cannot occur. The infections can be bacterial, viral, or fungal. Most people can recover in 1 to 3 weeks, but for certain people, pneumonia can be extremely serious and even life-threatening. Pneumonia is caused by inhaling foreign matter or toxic substances into the lungs. Symptoms: coughing, chest pain, and difficulty in breathing. Next is the asthma. Asthma is an inflammation and tightening the muscles of the lung airways. It causes wheezing, chest tightening, shortness of breath, and cough that often brings up mucus or phlegm. So it happens when a person was exposed to various irritants and substances such as airborne substances, air pollutions, and cold air. And third one is the emphysema, which occurs when the walls of the alveoli break down so less gas can be exchanged in the lungs. So when you exhale, the damaged alveoli don't work properly and the old air becomes trapped, leaving no room for fresh, oxygen-rich air to enter. This causes shortness of breath. So, emphysema is caused by smoking and irreversible. So, means it is impossible to change back to a previous condition. So, the last common disease of the respiratory system is the lung cancer. It is often associated with smoking and can affect non-smokers as well. It is caused by uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells. So, as these abnormal cells grow, it can form tumors and interfere with the functioning of the lungs. Symptoms: a cough that does not go away or gets worse, coughing up blood or rust-colored known as the phlegm, chest pain that is often worse with deep breathing, coughing, or laughing. So, that's the lung cancer all about. So, those are just the common symptoms, or those are the common diseases of the respiratory system. So after the diseases, let's now talk about on how to take care of our respiratory system. Number one, avoid tobacco exposure. So quit smoking. This is the most effective way to keep your respiratory system healthy. If you are not a smoker, be aware of the effects of inhaling secondhand smoke. Second, reduce fatty food intake and keep a balanced diet. Third, limit exposure to common allergens. Fourth, maintain high standards of hygiene. Fifth, follow an exercise routine. Stay hydrated, okay, to help you flush any toxins of your respiratory system. Reduce your alcohol intake and utilize steam inhalation and vaporization. So those are the things that we need to remember for us to keep safe or to take care of our respiratory system. So that's all for today. And now I would like you to check our Google Classroom for your activity, and then after that you will have your quiz. So thank you for listening and have a good day. Bye.